Welcome. This is Thursday, the 19th of November, 2009, and this is Simply the Truth live with me, Doug Harris. Welcome. You are very welcome, and you are indeed as important as us here in the studio. First of all, I must thank Tom for sitting in my chair and keeping it warm last week, and you will see him from time to time. I know I had one or two people ringing up the office and emailing me asking if I was all right. Yes, we are going to have some planned times when Tom will sit in and I get a day off. But they will be few and far. Well, no, they won't be. They're probably about every 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. So thanks, Tom, for that, and you will be seeing him again. And for the person that sent the email and said it was great to see Tom yesterday on Simply the Truth, and it wasn't too bad that Doug wasn't there. Thank you very much. I appreciated that. It really boosted me. No, bless you. It's great to have this opportunity of communication, and the subject that we're going to dealing with today is so important. Just to remind you that all things Simply the Truth you can find on the Revelation website, revelationtv.simplythetruth. You could go on there. There's all the details. You will actually it's simplythetruth.revelationtv.com. You'd never find it if you went the other way around. But you can find all the details there, all that's going on, all that's happening, contacts from the past, what's going to happen in the future. Also, the place where you can communicate, the place where you can share. You can put your questions, you can put your comments. So if you missed the opportunity today of sharing with us, you want to do it as you're watching the repeat, get onto that page and we will be glad to hear from you. Today it's quite a deep subject, it's quite a popular subject, it's quite a necessary subject. It's the whole area of marriage and divorce. Something that we get asked questions on time and time again, and we're going to begin to tackle it today. I'm not going to guarantee we're going to get all the answers today, and of course it's not just me that's going to be doing it. I'm so glad to welcome back Warren Jones. Warren?
Hey,
how you doing? I just thought you were going to say a pearl of wisdom was about to drop out of you.
What I was going to say was this: thank you so much for the opportunity to come back on.
It's great.
It's a great privilege for me. It's a great honour.
It's a privilege for us as well, just to share the scriptures together. And as we were talking before, I'm going to plan a few more times, and I suspect that this one will carry over to another time.
It's a big subject.
It's a big subject, isn't it? But you were in more palatial surroundings, I hear. In fact, just behind you.
Absolutely.
So you're at State Opening Apartment?
I don't want to boast, but yesterday I was a guest in the central lobby for the State Opening of Parliament.
Right.
Couldn't see too much at the beginning, but we pushed our way to the front, and then we saw all the great and the good file past us, all those great men and women in whose hands our lives are resting. Yeah. So it was a great day. And then I had lunch, carvery lunch on the terrace. It was a great day.
Wow.
But not as good as day as today.
You are so kind. we get that in writing and put that as part of Revelation TV advert.
Anyway.
Yes.
That's fine.
Great. Well, it is great to have you with us. But we're going to start, obviously, with the side of marriage. And,
Sure.
and in a moment, I'm going to get you to begin to open up biblically the whole story. And knowing you're going to start at Genesis, and we might get through to Revelation before the end. But there's a few statistics that I just really want to underline, which I picked these up, and this is from 2007. And the statistics are this: that there were 270,000 weddings in the UK in 2007, a fall of 2.7% since 2006. But when you take the long-term picture, UK weddings is definitely in one of decline from a peak of 480,000 in 1972. So in 30 years, the number of marriages has actually halved. And when you consider how much the population has gone up, you can begin to see there's quite a big difference there. The number of marriages in England and Wales that were the first for both partners peaked in 1940 at 426,000. When 91% of all marriages were the first for both partners. This number has since fallen in 2007 to 143,000, accounting for 62% of all marriages. And so that's a drop of 30% in something like 60 years. So again, it shows how many people are, of course, some of those people, that would be people that had died. It would not be people that, but obviously the divorce and remarriage is coming in there. And this I felt, because obviously we, coming from a Christian perspective and a biblical perspective today, I felt this statistic was very interesting. Since 1992, there have been more civil ceremonies in England and Wales than religious ceremonies. In 2007, civil ceremonies accounted for 67% of all ceremonies, which is an increase from 61% in 1997. So again, you're finding more and more people are getting married, and whereas back in the when that high was in 1992, where even then still more people were getting married in a religious ceremony. That's completely changed now, and that figure is going down and down and down and down. Well, why do you think that is, Warren?
I think that obviously in our culture, marriage is devalued. I think there's great responsibility on government to begin to build up again the importance of marriage, because other statistics show that children are healthier, happier, and are more fulfilled when they come out from a marriage situation. I think that is true. But the church has to cope with the fact that it doesn't have the authority in society that it has, and that most couples now decide to live together. How many of those break up is another matter. Here's another interesting thing that you quote, that more are taking civil ceremonies rather than religious ceremonies. I don't quite know how to feel about that for this reason. It could well be that in the past, a lot of people had religious ceremonies because churches were pretty. And they just liked the idea of choirs and bells. And I'm not sure how much went on in real commitment of a marriage before God. And maybe a civil ceremony is a more honest thing. The one thing it did in the past is that when they came to churches to be married, it gave us an opportunity to speak to them, to present Jesus, and to talk through with them the spiritual significance of marriage. So in some ways it's more honest, but in some ways we've missed an opportunity.
It's interesting, isn't it, that maybe people aren't being hypocritical anymore.
Yes.
And they are saying, look, I'm not religious, I don't have anything to do with this, but I do want to have a marriage certificate, I do want that to take place, therefore we will just go for the civil ceremony. And maybe they're being honest.
I think the question we need to ask ourselves is this: is a marriage outside of church, without God being brought into it, just as much a marriage in the sight of God as a religious ceremony?
Now, having asked the question, I trust you're going to answer it, Warren.
I thought I might have your opinion first.
I mean, to me, in the final analysis, it was God who began marriage, as it were. That's where it came from. I mean, if you take the scriptural record, God began marriage. God brought the two together. Therefore, he always and ever wanted to be in the midst of the marriage of two people, didn't he? And therefore, to me, yes, the complete marriage is with God in the middle. But I wonder if, and I think it depends on who you are, the answer to your question.
Yes.
If somebody genuinely wants to commit themselves to another person and goes through a civil ceremony because they really want to be together and commit themselves to them, I think there's some honesty there. and there's some reality there. But for Christians to do that, I would really question.
Exactly. I think that's a thing I'll want to say in a moment or two about this bringing God in right at the beginning. But I believe that God is bigger than our churches and bigger than our services. And I think he's a God that operates within the world and is operating invisibly and powerfully within the world, even when men don't recognize it. And I believe he has set up the institution of marriage in every society. Every society will have its rites, its ceremonies, and wherever they are, it is this open, public acknowledgement that you're committing yourselves to each other. I think that this is the whole thing. You know that in a church, you can't lock the doors when a wedding's taking place.
No, that's right.
Because the public nature of it is very important. The words are, I call upon these persons here present.
And then you hold your breath for half an hour.
Yes. But the issue there is that you're asking people to witness that.
Yes.
And it is that public witnessing of one's commitment to another human being that I think is the heart of marriage. And God has seen to it that it exists in all societies. And therefore, for me, a civil marriage is just as much a marriage in the sight of God as another, and should be valid as such. But there is an added dimension when Christians bring God into the equation.
I can see already we're talking nitty-gritty with that. I'll come back to the overview in just a minute, but it raises one other issue to me. Supposing you have two people, and what you've said is they really want to be committed together, and so they really commit themselves together, and they live together. And they're really committed. There's no intention of, let's try it out, and if it don't work, off we go. They're really committed together. Where does that come into all of this?
The question is a ceremony of some kind necessary for it, or is that private commitment to each other important? I think the Bible stands for public marriage. I think even if you go right back to the very beginning, and remember Jesus, when he was answering all questions on marriage, says, at the beginning, from the creation. So right. Our understanding of marriage must go right back to God's original intention. Now, right back there, in Genesis chapter 2, I believe there's a formality about the proceedings. God is there, and he brings the woman, and then Adam responds with those beautifully poetic words, but I believe they're words of commitment spoken publicly in the presence of God. So, for me, I think it's important that people need to witness their commitment to each other publicly, in the presence of God, but also according to the laws of the land.
Yes.
And I think that to try to do something else is somehow or other to evade the issue.
Yes.
If I'm willing to commit, why am I not willing to commit within the context of the legal framework of the land? I would want to do that.
Yes.
It's interesting that in the Jewish history of things, there were built in to the whole framework of marriage certain safeguards for the woman. It was in the form of gifts and dowries and all that kind of thing. But those legal safeguards are not there to be barriers and obstructions, but they're there to hold the thing up, to hold it together. There's institution. And who says marriage is an institution? That's Who wants to live in an institution?
That's right.
But the institutional side of marriage can be important,
yes.
Particularly later on when things come under stress and tension. I think we need that legal framework to hold things together.
It's interesting. Well, I tell you what we do. We're going to open the emails and the text, and I'm going to get you to start at Genesis, as I promised you would. But as we're going through today, as Warren is sharing, as we ask the questions, and maybe there are other questions on this whole area that you want to ask, we're not asking. That's why we want you to be involved. Come on with your email, come on with your text. We'll bring those in as they are relevant to what we are seeking to talk about in the area that we're there. And we really want to get through as many of those as we can. And then, of course, later on, we will be opening the phone lines for you so that you can come on and ask directly. But we want to set the scene from the biblical standard. Obviously, we are Christians. This is a Christian channel, and so this is the basis as we see it. Now, there may be some of you out there who, as we've already dealt with, that do not have the same worldview as us. And maybe there are other questions. I think we've already tackled some of them for you. And there may be other questions that you have. Great. That isn't a problem to us. We will be delighted to have you come on and share and communicate and ask those questions as well. But Warren, let's, because we're Christians, as we said, because this is what the majority of people expect us to be, let's lay the foundation from that biblical background.
Would it be all right if I preface my remarks with this?
You do what you like.
I am not a theologian. I am not a biblical scholar. I'm a pastor.
Right.
Seeking to understand God's word, to take it seriously, and apply it with grace in a broken world. So that's where I'm coming from. But now, my understanding of the Scripture, and it must.
Having said that, though, come on, you have studied the Word of God for quite a number
many,
of
many
years. So there's your validity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And one's validity can only rest in what the Word of God says. But if we come right back to Genesis chapter 2, there's some fascinating things there that illuminate what marriage is about. First of all, God says that when He'd made everything, it was good. And then when He made man and it was all complete, He said, it's very good. Mm-hmm. Then He spotted something that wasn't good. And what wasn't good was that man was alone. And God's heart in marriage is this companionship for human beings. God made us, and He made us all different, and we thank God for that. But He never meant us to be isolated. In fact, I think His highest for us is to come into that communion with another human being at that deepest of all levels, which is marriage. And that was God's heart. So here is marriage as an expression of God's heart of love for the man that He's created. And then it says that I'll make a helper suitable for him.
Yes.
That's good.
That's right.
So, first of all, we see that God's intention was that she should be a helper. That's be involved with him in the work that God had planned for him. You know that God always planned that men should work. And He plans that the woman should be alongside them in that, taking her part. Their work, of course, was looking after the garden. And so He's alongside her. But I love this thought that she is a helper suitable for him. Mm-hmm. And I've read that word suitable in Hebrew is actually, in fact, means the opposite to him, the other side to him.
Yeah.
So here's Adam, and here now is this woman who's created, and she's like him, but she's the other way around. Yeah. Haven't you found that about marriage?
Yeah. I'm saying nothing. My wife's watching. I'm saying nothing.
But that's the wonderful thing about it. Vive la différence.
Yeah.
They're so like us.
Absolutely.
That's why we can be partners.
Yes.
But they're the opposite. Maybe that's why opposites attract.
Absolutely.
My wife and I are very, very different.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that she is different.
Yes.
Maybe that's what...
Because you get this different view, don't you? You get this different way of doing things. And you learn from the other one that there are different ways. If we only ever did what we wanted to do, whereas you learn that there are some different things and different ways to be able to go about it.
And I don't want to talk too much about my own marriage today, but she's a very wonderful woman. She's very gentle. She's very quiet, very reserved, and that's what attracts me about her. And I've attempted over the years that some of that should rub off of me. Not a lot has rubbed off, but maybe enough.
I think you and I have got more in common than you know.
But isn't it lovely that God says at the beginning He made a male and female, and the female not to be identical with a man. I think there are forces in society that are trying to make women absolutely identical, but they're complementary to the man.
Yes.
And it is that complementarian position that I would want to hold in marriage. The one complements the other, is the reverse, the opposite of, and then coming together, they form that wholeness that God intended. Then the thing moves on, of course, that God repeats that fact. He takes her out of his body, causes a deep sleep to come on him, takes his rib. And you know the famous things that are said about the rib. But it's worth repeating because he says he takes it from his side, not from his head, so that he could that he should rule over her, not only his feet, that he should that she should rule over him, not over his feet, that he should trample on her, but from his side, so that he should be able to protect her close to his heart, so that he should love her. And I love that thought. However we understand those words, that God has brought to me someone who belongs right there.
Yeah.
You know, this,
yes, absolutely.
And maybe just that cuddling is an important part of marriage. And then he brings her to him. I think that's very important, because at that point you're recognizing God's part in the marriage. Later on, Jesus Christ is going to use these words, whom God hath joined together. So this isn't just a man and a woman deciding to cohabit. This is God bringing the woman, presenting her to him, just as the father, I guess, gives the bride away in a church. So God acts in that capacity. He brings Eve, gives her to the man, and then he says those beautiful words. Let me quote them because they're so lovely. This is now bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman, for she was taken out of the man.
Mm-hmm.
And what God had intended, because she comes out from his bone and flesh, God's intention then is that in the marital act, they should come back together in sexual union and make themselves again one flesh. I think we need to say something about the importance of sex in marriage. It's a part of God's original intention. Any views that might hold that sex somehow is not clean, is not right, it certainly has nothing to do with the Word of God.
That's right.
And that's certainly not what Paul was teaching, what Jesus was teaching. It's a very wonderful thing. I think God's an absolute genius for thinking about it. And his original intention was that they should come together in that oneness. I think that oneness is more than just a physical oneness. All it says it's one flesh, and we know that the man doesn't become the woman doesn't become the man. Somewhere there is an emotional, spiritual intimacy that is a part of the physical intimacy.
And isn't that what should be happening in any marriage? That as you develop, as you grow together, as you spend the years together, you do become closer together.
Absolutely.
You do become more one together. And I think it's, and of course this is the tragedy of divorce, because it's cutting through, it's cutting the two that need to be one, it's separating them again. And when we get on to that, we know there may be times when tragically that has to happen, but you know, it's not what God has ever wanted and ever looked at.
I think when young men marry, if we're honest with each other, I think the sexual component is very high on their agenda. They want it. And then they begin to learn that, in actual fact, the sexual element of marriage is secondary to the emotional and the spiritual. And I think as you grow older and wiser, and not everybody grows wiser as they grow older, then you learn that in actual fact, I'll be as blunt as I can. I believe that the best sexual relationship comes from the deepest emotional and spiritual relationship. And I think as a young man learns with his wife in that lovely learning situation, I think that's wonderful, isn't it? That they can learn together, come together and begin to learn. But as they begin to learn to love in that deeper way, as they begin to find out things about each other, understand each other, then I think that feeds back into the sexual, and the sexual into the understanding of each other. But that's God's plan, that there should be this growing together in all areas of marriage.
And it is a process, because I mean, even as you look through the scriptures with Adam and Eve, and okay, we know we've got the fall and everything to come, but there was still a developing of that relationship together. I mean, here was Adam presented with Eve. Didn't know her, wasn't aware of her, and yet that had to develop, and that relationship needed to develop. But it needed to develop with God. I mean, that was the way it really was going to develop, wasn't it? And
That's right.
and it seems to me that is, as what we're saying, is that was always and ever God's original intention.
I love this statement that the man and his wife were both naked and they felt no shame.
Yes.
I think there's something about that nakedness in each other's presence that is more than physical nakedness. It's a total openness to each other. See, I think that there should be no secrets in marriage.
Yeah.
I think that as a marriage develops, we begin to find out more about the other person. And I think maybe that this physical nakedness is only a symbol of a deeper, more profound nakedness as we are exposed to each other and feel no shame about it.
Yeah.
That's the lovely thing. There's no
Yes.
shame.
Yeah.
This openness to each other in marriage, this beginning to find out about each other. But the part that God plays in it is very important, isn't it? It says, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. And that word united, we call it leaving and cleaving. But the word means to join yourself as if you're glued to each other. And that's why Jesus said, whom God has glued together, whom God has joined together, let not man put asunder. And I think we need to find something of that glue that sticks people together again. I think that's the problem with this other thing, which doesn't have any formal, legal, or spiritual
Yes,
content.
there's no glue there.
There's no glue there. And I think we need to find not just the glue of a legal framework, but the glue of spiritual commitment and of God's presence in the marriage. I think that's so important. Whom God has joined together.
Yes.
It's quite interesting that one of the words that the Old Testament uses for this joining, this sticking, is the word that's used by God of his relationship with us. It's called a covenant. So in Malachi, he's upbraided them for leaving the wife of the youth and breaking the wife of your covenant. And then in Proverbs chapter 2, it talks about a woman who doesn't recognize, or who ignores rather, her covenant before God. So it isn't coming together and merely saying legal words. I think there is something of bringing by oath God into the matter and recognizing the binding nature of the agreement. A covenant, in its simplest form, is just a contract. But there must be more than contract when God's involved.
Yes.
There must. You remember the old-fashioned words? I plight thee my troth.
Yes.
And I had to look up in a dictionary what it meant. And plight means to pledge.
Yes.
And truth means your promise. So you're actually giving a pledge of your promise. Your pledge is when I hand you something, and this kind of guarantees that I'm going to keep my word.
Yes.
And I like that thought, that you're coming together not only with a promise, not only with a ceremony, but with a pledging of a commitment, bringing God into the matter. You're making, as Proverbs says in chapter 2, she is ignoring the covenant made before God, with God. I think he's the glue. And I think if anything was needed in marriage these days, it's a bit of glue, a bit of stickability, because it's so easy just to separate.
And therefore, as Christians, I think maybe we need to sort some of these things out before we get married. In other words, when you were talking there, I was reminded of the parable, which probably doesn't really flow in, but I think it's a good illustration of this, of the guy wants to build a tower, and before he builds a tower, he makes sure he's got enough bricks to build the tower. And it seems to me that there is that, and we need good marriage counselling for young people, that, this isn't just an optional extra, but we are clearly moving into this as a covenant, yes, with the husband, yes, with the wife, but also before God. And we can't just play fast and loose with that, can we?
I think the church needs to do two things. First, of all, be very, very clear that this is a serious issue. I think the wedding service says that, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Gathered here in the sight of God. And it just says that we talk about the solemnizing of marriage. And maybe I've been in a few too many weddings where there's too much laughter.
Yeah.
Not that weddings are the unhappy things. I mean, I love weddings. I love funerals, by the way.
Yeah.
But I love dedications. I love
Yes.
weddings. And they should be joyous events.
Yes.
But somewhere in that joy, we need to be getting people to recognize
Yes.
the solemnity of the matter. This is lifelong commitment. This is a binding thing we're doing in the presence of God, and we are calling not just our friends and family, but calling God to bear witness to that joining. So we need to be clear in the statement. But then we need to prepare young people. Now, here's my problem. I've done a lot of marriage counseling. I insist on marriage counseling.
Yes.
Before I marry anyone, I take them through all the issues from A to Z, to their embarrassment, but not to mine. We talk about money, we talk about sex. I like to take them through the wording of the service, the things they're going to say in their vows.
Absolutely, yeah.
The problem is this: they will sit there and nod their heads.
Yes.
And it's not until 2 years down the
I know,
road
I know.
that they begin to recognize.
Yes.
But I'm just hoping and praying that something of what I and my wife would have said to them during those times will come back.
I mean,
and just have
actually, I usually say that to them
Yes.
when I'm talking to them. I usually say, look, you're not going to take half of this in.
Absolutely.
But what I want you to know is when you get down the road and you hit the problem, shout.
Yes.
You know, don't just, oh, this is it, we've finished. I said, come and chat with us, come and talk with us again, ask us to come in. And what you will find is some of the principles that we're actually sharing with you now that you haven't taken on board will really work out
Exactly.
within your
we can then
lives.
say, oh, remember what I said.
Yes, yeah.
Didn't I tell you?
Yeah, forget that.
And then it becomes real in the situations.
That's right.
And I think we have a responsibility before marriage. I wonder if we have a responsibility during courtship or even before courtship to help people, because very often people who come to us later, they say, I should have never have married that person. And sometimes I want to say, I
know.
think you're right. But I don't, because I believe once the commitment is
Yeah.
made
Yes.
and the glue is there, that they're stuck with. I don't believe marriage is indissoluble, but it's only on biblical grounds. And I believe that when you make that commitment, you need to know what you're doing. But if somewhere along the line, early on, someone could have helped them to ask the right questions about the partner and what they were looking for and what their expectations were. See, I think that men and women bring to marriage very different sets of expectations.
Absolutely.
And it's the matching of those
Yes.
that becomes the difficulty.
It does. And of course, it's sometimes the disappointments because you think you should have this and you don't have that.
That's right.
And it is very much that, I mean, because doesn't it talks very much about there's this picture of marriage as Christ and his church. And I think there's some real similarities there, that when I first get saved and I first come to Christ, I have all sorts of things that I think I should do, I should be, I am. And the Lord has to lovingly show me that's not true, that's not going to happen. And in marriage, it's the same thing. And if we get the impression, that we've made our vows before God, we're off, there's never going to be, a problem anymore. I think if we sell that sort of picture to people, we really are selling them something that's false, and they need to know there will be some rocky moments, but what do we do in those rocky moments? That's the important thing.
Exactly. And I think the first thing we do is commit ourselves to holding that marriage together. I think it's very easy to say, look, this isn't working separate. I think that as Christian ministers, we have to make a commitment that we're going to do all in our power to get that couple to stay together. The strange thing is this, you see, that arranged marriages seem to work, don't they?
Yes.
we make a big thing of choice, and I'm sure choice is important. I think it's a biblical principle. But there's a sense in which marriage, where there's a will, can be made to work, and I think that's our job. But then the other thing we need to do is to deal with those basic problems that occur in every marriage. And I think the heart of that problem is the heart of the human problem, which is the problem of the human heart, which is sin. And I believe the center of human sin is selfishness. And as you say, I come to the marriage with my expectations.
Yes, that's right.
And when it doesn't match up to my expectations, then I get in a huff and I sulk, or I go off and try to find those expectations met somewhere else. But if I could come to marriage, or at least if I could be helped later on in marriage to recognize that the pattern for marriage is Jesus and his church. And he says, who loved it and gave himself for it.
Yeah.
And it is this giving of myself, this total surrender of myself. Hey, this is easy for me to say now, isn't it? Right?
I know.
I'm preaching an idea. But it is the pattern.
Yes.
So that I am not important. My expectations, what I want, not important. And if I can live for the other person, if I can live to meet the desires, the longings, expectations of the other person, I think that's Calvary. It's bringing the cross into marriage. So we not only bring God in, but we bring God in Jesus, and we preach Christ crucified. He comes as a crucified Savior to bring something of that cross into every department of our living. So in marriage, I live a cross life. I'm crucified with Christ. I crucify my needs. But here's the wonderful thing, because God didn't intend to deprive me of anything. The more I surrender myself to the other person, the more fulfilled I become. The two become one flesh.
Yeah.
So,
but this is the principle, isn't it, of all? I mean, it's often been said, I mean, whether you're talking about as individuals, whether you're talking about as marriages, whether you're talking about as governments, as countries, selfishness will always be the problem.
Always.
Because if I want something, you know, and I'm going to get it, whatever
Absolutely.
comes. I mean, that's what wars are made of in many times. I mean, that's what all the heartache and the hardships are made of. That's why certain people have too much and other people don't have enough, and all of those things. And you've got that in microcosm in marriage, haven't you? Because you are put together. Yes, you've had other relationships before, i.e. you've had mother, you've had father, maybe brother and sister, and you've had those sort of but nothing is of the intensity of husband and wife, is it? And you're suddenly in a whole new intensity that you were never in before.
I think that's the leaving the father and mother, isn't it? There's something unique about it, something special about it. And I think that's why God considers it to be very important. I think the uniqueness, as the wedding service says, forsaking all other, cleave thou only unto him or to her.
Yeah.
And it is that coming together in that way that does it. I think the problem is that we're living in a me society.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Doug, we're living in a me church.
Yes.
How do I get blessed? How do I get rich?
Yeah.
How can I get this and that and the other?
Yeah.
And the call of the gospel is to crucifixion. And I think in marriage it is. But through it all, greater fulfillment, I am more me when I surrender in that marriage than ever I was.
Yeah.
In actual fact, without my wife, I'm not a full human being.
No.
I think I find my fullness in that relationship in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful to be married.
We've got to Genesis 2,
Yes.
but we've also got some emails which
Okay.
I'd like to begin to bring in.
Sure.
And some of them are very relevant to. I mean, they're all relevant, but some of them are very relevant to just the things that we've been saying on. This was a text message that came in a while ago when we were talking about church marriages and that.
Yes.
And some people do and some people don't. From my experience, many church marriages are dead and devoid of God's Spirit and very expensive.
Yes.
The church often marries couples living together without correcting the way they have been living. I think there is that essence, isn't it? Because when we say church, we are actually talking about a very broad spectrum.
We are.
From those who, live and let live and everything's fine, to those that would really want to live out the Word of God. So not all churches would do that, but some would. And I guess if that's what you've seen, if those are the sort of marriages you've been to, maybe you don't want to do it.
I think what I'd want to say into this situation is this, that we as a church exist to be a witness in the world and to serve the world. And I wouldn't want to cut myself off and say, we are only going to marry Christian people. I think that if our couples come who are not Christian, but who are willing to go through the process of counseling, are willing to have the prayers and the vows explained to them, and then sincerely and in truth are willing to say those things, even though they're not born again and have gone through a conversion experience, I would want, as the church, to be there to perform that service. And then, because I can be there afterwards,
Yes,
when they
absolutely.
find out that they can't manage without God.
Yeah.
And I think that even in the hearts of many non-Christian people, there is a desire to have God involved in it. And I think we can help in that situation. Of course, the problem is this vast expense, all the dresses. Do you know how much a wedding costs these days?
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Something
isn't
like
it?
£20,000. And if we as churches exist just to take money off them,
I
say,
know.
this is a way of making money.
I don't think each church gets £20,000, do they?
No, it doesn't. I think that's reception and dress and honeymoon.
Absolutely.
And probably is even more than that.
Yeah, yeah.
But if we're just there to be taking people's money, but if we're there to say, look, we believe that even though you're not a Christian, God wants to be involved in your
Amen.
wedding, and you come to us on our terms, I think we can speak into that situation.
And it's treating them where they are, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We don't have to pretend that they were a Christian or that they are Christian, but we can share with them the love of God.
Yes.
And we can still pray for them that God will bless them and will meet them. So it's you don't have to say, oh, you're Christians, you're all right, fine. No, you're not. But you want something, and you want to be blessed by God.
Yes.
So we can, as long as we're not being hypocritical about it, and as long as they're not being
Sure.
hypocritical about it, I think God's involved. God can deal with reality. He can't deal with lies and hypocrisy, can he?
I've heard some ministers say that they would never ask a blessing on it. They would marry a couple, but then they would stop short of asking a blessing upon that marriage. I don't think it's a nonsense.
No, I do as well.
Because God blesses
Yes,
non-Christian people. He blesses them in all sorts of
I
ways.
know.
And I want to bless them.
Yeah.
And I want to be a channel for God to impart that blessing to them. And I'd be very happy to pray over them.
Yeah, and it depends what you say, isn't it? If you say, you're now children of God and, God's Spirit dwells within and all that. No, but Lord, bless this couple. Show
Absolutely.
yourself to them.
Absolutely.
Give them an understanding for each other. Why not?
Because one of the important things about marriage, of course, is that God ordained it for the procreation for children. And there are children going to come from this marriage, and I want to be there
Yeah.
in some way to have an influence in the lives of those children that
Yes.
come about. And by building relationship in wedding and support afterwards, I think it's good.
Isn't this part of being, of the much wider thing of being in this world but not of the world? In other words, and I've got a couple of questions which home in on this in just a minute, which again I'll get to. But it is this area, isn't it, where I will not compromise. They will know what I believe. They will know what I say. But I still want to be involved with them to share the reality of the Christ I know with those people. But I'm not going to compromise what I believe, and I do understand where they're coming from. And it's being in the world but not
Yes.
of the world, isn't it?
I think the church has a big responsibility to be clear in its teachings, but not necessarily judgmental, to be redemptive in all that it does. That doesn't mean we fudge any issue.
Right.
And we have the opportunity to deal with all those things, but I do it from a heart of grace that's there to serve them. It's interesting that first person asked about the church marrying people who've been living together.
Yes.
Well, if they've been living together, and now they want
to be married.
to be married, in some senses,
Yes.
I should rejoice to that. I should
But I
love
think
that.
what they said was without
without
discussing
challenging.
with them,
Absolutely.
without sharing with them, and they were just saying, "Oh, that's perfectly all right, carry on."
Yes.
In other words, in the counselling that we would give them, we would say how great it was that
Yes.
that they
I
were-
had situations more difficult to handle where a couple have lived together for many years and then have become Christians and then plan to marry because eventually they see that it's right. The question is, how soon should you be telling them that they should marry?
Yes.
And what should you be telling them about their sexual relationship before that takes place?
know.
Those are big issues.
I know.
And but we try to do it in grace and as sensibly can. But my issue is that I think that once they see they should marry, then we need to be there to do it.
Yeah.
Here's the big problem, and I faced this one. What if one of the partners becomes a Christian, the other doesn't, and you feel that somehow or other their staying together is not going to help.
It's funny you should say that. Good afternoon. We, that is my husband Keith and I, got married in a registry office because at the time it seemed the only place open to us. I wasn't a Christian at the time, and my husband had gone through a divorce many years earlier. We have been married now for 25 years and live separately but still love each other. I don't think I should divorce him. Anyway, I don't think I have biblical grounds for it. You can put me right on this point. Thank you for this discussion, Beverly.
Well, I think first of all, Beverly, she was married as much in the registry office as if she were in a church. Paul actually speaks to that situation in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And he talks about wives that have separated from their husbands. And he says you should either remain single or be reconciled to your husband. And I don't know what the circumstances are, but as a minister, yes, I would seek to bring about reconciliation.
Yes.
See, one of the problems that Paul is dealing with in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is this thought by women, if I have sexual relationship with a non-Christian, then somehow any children that will be born will be defiled, that it's not so, that my relationship is impure. And Paul points out very, very clearly that isn't so.
That's right.
That the Christian person, the saved person, sanctifies the child through that, and sanctifies, and actually has an influence on the husband. And I believe it is God's will, even for Christian ladies who are married to non-Christian ladies, to have a full marriage in every sense of the word, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Now that's not always easy.
That's right.
And
not always possible.
No. That's why Paul goes on to speak afterwards about another situation. He says God has called us to be at peace.
Yes.
And so I think that for the sake of peace, sometimes we have to take certain steps. But our desire and our efforts, I think, should be to bring that about. But it's very difficult to have an emotional intimacy with someone who is involved in things that have no interest to you and scorns and maybe scoffs. What do you think? I don't know what this particular situation is.
There are several things here which, of course, we don't know. And Beverly, if you would like us to help you further, do come back to us at some time, and even after the program, and we would happily do that, because you say that you still love each other, and obviously that speaks of a relationship, still one with another they have. You don't think you should divorce him, no, and I think that we certainly wouldn't want to correct you on that. We would say that's what God has put in your heart, and that's right. I think what we would go on to pray is that there could be a total reconciliation, and that love could fully be expressed.
Yes. I think love has to be expressed, doesn't it?
Yes.
And there are ways of doing that, and sexual love is not the only way of expressing that. It's in all sorts of ways. But I don't see why it should stop short.
I mean, I don't know if it comes up here, but is there a place where it may be that because she wasn't a Christian and now she's become a Christian, that she feels she can't live with a non-Christian? I mean, talk us through that.
Well, Paul speaks about it very, very clearly. And he says that if you're in that with an unbeliever, seek not to be separated from them. If he separates from you, then you're free.
Yeah.
But if you're with a person who's not a Christian, an unbeliever, then don't seek to be separated from them. Stay in that situation. And he goes on later to talk about, who knows that you might win him through your love.
Yes.
And I think that the way that we win husbands to Jesus Christ is not by preaching at them or leaving New Testaments under their pillows.
That's right.
It is by
playing the praise tapes loud.
Absolutely. No, that's right. Well, that's another one. That's a good one. But it is to do with this relationship that we have with each other.
Yeah.
And God loved us in that way, didn't he?
He did, and yeah, it is, and I think what you're bringing out there is marriage is very much that conversation, that very much that sharing one with another, isn't there? And it isn't just the spiritual, and there is a very interesting point there. And again, is we know who we are, we know who we are in Christ. We are not compromising ourselves, but we are in this relationship and God is not moving us out of it. Therefore, that's how we will live in that relationship.
Yes. I mean, it might affect the number of times you go to church.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, if you've got a non-Christian husband, then I don't think you should be in church every night of the week.
No.
I think you need to go negotiate with him what is fair. I think there need to be times when you do the things, as long as they're not sinful things,
Yes.
that he's interested in. It is just giving
Yes.
to each other, but still in it all, holding to the fact, look, I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
There are things I will not do,
Yeah.
things I will not be involved
Yeah.
in. I have a commitment to God. I have a commitment to his people, so I will be attending church. There are things I would want to do with money. These are all issues that I think need to be worked out in a very individual matter. I think that's one of the things we want to say about marriage. And when we begin to enter into difficulties in marriage, it's all so individual that we need the wisdom of God to know how to speak into each situation.
Amen.
And each is different.
And here, Warren, is another situation we need wisdom. And Janet's emailed in, and I reckon this is a dilemma that is going to happen in about a month or so's time to many folks. And it goes like this. Hi there, can you help us? We have a dilemma. Our daughter and her male partner would like to come and spend Christmas with us, but they are not married, and we are not sure whether or not we should allow them to sleep together under our roof. They have set up home together and are fully committed to each other with marriage planned for next year. Thank you.
That's a good question.
Is that-
First of all,
most people say that when they have not
they don't know what to say.
else.
Absolutely. And I'm hesitating because I don't want to jump in with
No.
both feet.
No.
I think you have a family situation in which you're dealing with your daughter. There is a sense in which the decision the daughter makes are her decisions. Mm-hmm. She's living with this man, she's living all the time, and therefore that becomes her responsibility. The question then arises, when they come under my roof,
Yes.
are they coming back under my set of values, my truths that I hold good? And I think there's a measure in that.
Yes.
And I think that one can, without being too judgmental, say, look, you know where we stand. We support you in your de facto marriage with this man. We want to be with you, planning your marriage next year. But we feel you should be honouring where we stand as well. Because I think it's both ways.
Yes.
And I think lovingly they can tell their daughter, and at our roof, these are the values we stand by. So under our roof, I think you need to be occupying separate beds.
Interesting enough, Janet, and just what you said there, Warren, I've known several people that have gone that route, and it's actually it's enhanced the relationship because the son or the daughter appreciate where you stand, appreciate what you feel. And they appreciate the love, they appreciate the acceptance that you're not trying to kick them out or do anything, and that you want them to be part of your Christmas. But there are a few things which you don't feel you can accept. And certainly in, I think, every case that I've known, that's been willingly accepted. I'm sure there are times when the son or the daughter take the umbrage, but in all the cases I know, because it's been approached well, because it's been approached nice, that's what they've done.
Yeah, it's all to do with communication,
Yes.
isn't it? And
Yeah.
grace, and not indignation, but some understanding and approaching it. But I think that providing a bed for them to sleep in is tantamount to condoning it in some
Yes.
sense, isn't it?
Yes,
And I
it
think you
is.
have to draw a line somewhere and
Yes.
say, well, I think not in my house.
Yeah.
I'm asking you graciously to abide by the values that we hold in this house.
Absolutely. Amen. Or if not, come, visit, enjoy the day with us. But
That's right,
go on.
exactly. Sure.
Yeah. Good afternoon. This is from Corinne. I think we've touched upon this, but maybe you'd just like to answer it directly as it stands. Very simple question. Does God recognise marriages in the registry office?
Answer, yes. I think that God has set up this within society as a whole. So does God recognize Hindu weddings? Does he recognize Muslim weddings? Does he recognize Buddhist weddings? Yes. When they come together in the form that's understood within their culture, then God recognizes that as a marriage. and expects them to hold to the commitments they make in that marriage.
And of course, that's saying nothing about their spirituality, nothing about their coming to Christ. It's just that God recognizes in their hearts that there is a coming together. So we're not dealing with salvation. We're not dealing with God blessing them, filling them with the Holy Spirit. We're dealing with the fact that he recognizes his commitment between those two people.
Absolutely. You see, there is no wedding service as such in the Word of God, is there? You can't
No, actually, it's true. Yeah,
there's no one to say, well, this is the way we must do it.
I had to go through that recently, and we've discovered that there was that.
There's nothing. There is a form there in Genesis chapter 2.
But it's the heart, isn't it?
It's the heart.
It's God's heart to have.
But I think there is a kind of a structure, a framework around that within a society, and we need to give concession to that as well. Here's the thing. I think that when a couples have married in a registry office and then later become Christians, I think it's wonderful when they come to church, rehearse their vows again, and ask God's blessing on it.
Yeah.
Not that they weren't married beforehand, but I've done it many times, and it's an absolute delight to do it. I love doing it.
I, as many people know at this point, everybody wants to hang, draw, and quarter, but I've been married 3 times. Just pausing to just pausing.
I stand aghast.
Especially when I told you I've been married 35 years.
Yes,
it's all to the same woman. I hasten to add.
Oh, right, that's good. Yes.
I used to joke over that, but one time I was in a certain place and they wanted to not to let me preach because I was joking. I've been married 3 times. But the thing was this. My wife's Czech. Okay. So...
Yes.
In those days, the only recognised marriage in Czechoslovakia, as it was in the equivalent of the registry office. So we got married legally, and that was the legal time, in the registry office in communist Czechoslovakia at that time. God wasn't involved at all, but we committed ourselves. When I say God wasn't involved, I mean
as far as the society was concerned.
Society was concerned. But we committed ourselves one to another. And then we took our rings off. We went and had a meal. We took our rings off and we went to the church in the afternoon. And we got married again.
Yes.
And then when we got back to Britain, we got married a 3rd time. But it was bringing God to me. We were legally married at 12 o'clock or whatever it was when we finally made our vows. But it would not have been for me the completeness until we came and we then offered it before God, as it were, and brought God wholly into the situation. Not just making the legal vows, but saying, God, we want you to be. And that for us was the situation.
I think that's wonderful. And I think the church does give opportunity for people who've been married in registry office to come and go through their vows again. I think that sometimes when couples have drifted apart, when things have become difficult, it's good for them to come and renew vows.
Amen.
And so I'm very much into marriage renewal.
Well, because they could go through you don't have to go through original marriage counselling, but they could sit down and have a chat with the pastor. They can chat about what's going on, what they would like, what their aspirations are.
It might be more meaningful for them than for the young couple that just came and went through it the first place.
That's right. And then they can make those vows. And again, you mentioned this earlier on, it's the public declaration of those vows. Not only before God, but also before this congregation. Right. And you can do it again, and you can say it again, and you can say, yes, I mean it. And you can look your wife in the eye and say, yes, I mean it.
Lovely.
I get mixed
up. But let's assert very, very clearly
yeah.
that marriage in a registry office is marriage in the sight of God.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. Okay. Now, this question was phoned into our other office and has been passed on to us. This goes a little bit deeper than this one. And this one is this. What does it mean to love your wife as Christ loves the church? Now, we've used that phrase, or I used it, without explanation. And people are quite right to ring in and say, what on earth are you talking about?
I think that...
And that's in Ephesians.
That's in Ephesians. We see Ephesians chapter 5 there. Yeah. This says some lovely things. Isn't it lovely that in Genesis, right at the beginning of creation, you have marriage. And then in Ephesians, what you're talking about actually is the time when Christ is going to present the church to himself. I think that's a future day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so right at the end of time, when all time will have reached this fulfillment, there's marriage there, and the marriage supper of the Lamb. So I think that right at the beginning, right at the end of time, marriage is important. But there it says that the husband, it's interesting that it's the husband who's asked to love the wife in that way, as if there is some special responsibility on the man, not in some sentimental way, just say, oh, I'm in love. This has nothing to do with being in love. This is about loving. This is the verb. This is the doing word. And it's as Christ loved us and gave himself, as he loved the church and gave himself for it. And what we're talking about is the cross. We're talking about suffering.
Could you explain what you mean by that? That's a good phrase.
Sure.
What does that mean in practicality in somebody's life?
Jesus called his followers to take up their cross and follow him. Now, if a cross is a place where I put the other person in front of me, so Jesus Christ, it says he died for us. He gives himself for us. So do you remember as he was coming up to the cross, he says, let this cup pass from me. This is suffering. I can know what I'm going to go through. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will. I'm willing to go through this for the sake of sinners. And so the person says, I'm willing to set aside what I want, my demands, in order to make my marriage work. And there's something, the cross, that enters into it. And that's hard. That's hard for men. I think that's why God tells it to men and not to the women. Because it's harder for us. I think basically, I mean, I'm out of my depth theologically here, but I think basically men are more selfish than women.
Yes.
I think there's something to do with motherhood, that maternal thing, where she does give herself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But we men, it's me and I'm big guy and I'm important and I want this. And somehow the teaching of Jesus cuts right across that. And it brings me back to the cross. So Jesus says, let him take up his cross. Let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. And taking the cross is to do with denying myself, setting aside what I want. And then, of course, he says...
And so in marriage, that is putting the other person first. That doesn't mean to say always giving their way, because sometimes what you feel might be the right way. But it does mean, doesn't it, a real consideration for them. And even if what you are saying and wanting to do in the marriage is right, you are concerned that the other person doesn't just say, oh, you've got to do this, but the way that you do it and the way that you draw them along with you.
Just into that Ephesians chapter 5, just to develop some of the teaching that's there, what Paul is teaching us is that we should love our wives as we love our own bodies.
Yes.
Because no man hates his own body. In actual fact, these are the two words he uses. He nourishes it and he cherishes it.
Yes.
And those are lovely words. Is it right if I speak about those two words from it?
Carry on.
Because that will amplify quite a lot about what's involved in the marriage bond, I think. Nourishing means to feed. And so there's a sense in which I provide for my wife not just food. I don't just bring home the bacon. I actually feed her personality, I feed her emotions, I feed what she is. There is one sense of that word nourish in Greek, which means that it brings a child to maturity. So what if there's a responsibility on me as the husband to foster, care for, bring to fruition and maturity God's purpose in my wife? And so what I want is not important, but I'm seeking to develop her, feed her emotionally, feed her spiritually, bring her to that place in God that God has intended for her. The word cherish then is rather nice because it means to keep her warm. And, and maybe that as well isn't just about protecting and clothing and a roof over her head. Although I think there are responsibilities on a man to do that. And I think a lot of young men need to be reminded of their material responsibilities. Absolutely. Excuse me, sir. You married this woman, you have a
Yeah.
responsibility to provide for her and not go off buying your latest gadgetry or chasing off to pay, I don't know how much they pay for a Premier soccer match on a Saturday.
£50.
£50 when your wife is at home. I don't want to stop men going to see Arsenal, but what I want them to do is
Oh, you're
this.
not an Arsenal supporter.
No, that's right.
No, good.
What I want them to do is recognize the priority in those material matters to meeting the needs of the wife. But I think it goes beyond the material, and I think it goes to this cuddles, meeting her emotional needs.
Yeah.
If only I could recognize my responsibility in God for the other person.
Yeah. And I find those verses in Ephesians 5 are often totally misused, because they start in that passage with, of course, wives, be subject to your husbands. Now, I've got a question on that, and we'll come on to that in just a minute. But you could take that totally divorced from the rest of it, also totally misconstrue what the word subject means there. And you could say, wives, you've got to be subject to your husbands. But it goes on, the whole emphasis is on the relationship of the man loving the wife.
That's right.
And in fact, to me, those verses speak far more about the responsibility of the man loving his wife, not the world, not others, not out there, but loving it, than it does of the wife being subject to the husband. And I find that those verses can be totally misquoted and misconstrued.
Let me say where I stand on this whole issue. I do believe in the authoritative headship of the male within the church and within the
Yes.
marriage. The issue is how that headship is exercised. And it is on the basis of Calvary love.
Amen.
That sets it.
That's right.
And I think that if a man is expecting a woman to be a part with him, remember she's a helper suitable for him, and she is going to be involved with him in doing the work of God, she's not going to follow him if he's just shouting to 200 yards behind her, come on, this is the way. I think God intended man and woman to walk along together.
Yes.
And I think that in that, there's a priority, just as there is in the Godhead. I think that the Father and the Son, there's a voluntary submission of the Son to the Father, which means they're actually equal, totally
Yes,
equal,
yes.
but there's a voluntary submission
Yes.
in that. And I think that in marriage, but it depends entirely on the man exercising
Yes.
his role to love, care, nourish, feed, put into her, not put her down,
Yeah.
but to put her up in God.
Because both of those words, both subject and love, they can be very just sort of outward things. But both of those words in the Greek have this meaning of relationship. I mean, subject it's God's order. It's an order, as you said.
Right.
You can be equal, but you willingly. But it's God's order that's there. It's a relationship.
He goes on to talk about the relationship with children and parents.
Parents,
And that's an
yeah.
honouring, loving
That's right.
relationship.
And of course the husband loving. I mean, as it talks about in other places, and when it talks about you love your neighbour as yourself. How do you love yourself? And all that you do for that. That's how we love our wives. And it's relationship again. It's not a ritual. It's not a set of rules and regulations. You can't run a marriage like that. It's heart, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, to go right back to Genesis again, there are three kind of positions you can hold on the relationship before the fall,
Yes.
the relationship between man and women before sin entered, and there's the egalitarian position where they're both totally equal. There's the authoritarian position where the man is the boss and the woman does what he's told. But the position I see taught there is this complementarian
Yes,
position
amen.
where God sets the one as the opposite of the other
Yes.
to come together in that unity of relationship. And that submission and that love is worked out together
Amen.
in that relationship.
Amen.
And the one won't work without the other.
That's right.
That's important.
That's right.
Just talking about a man's attitude to a woman, we know that there are Christian husbands and they treat their wives like dishcloths, and I think that's not God.
That's right.
In actual fact, there's one thing I dislike intensely. It's when a man makes fun of his woman in public, or where a woman makes fun of the man. I think whenever we speak of our spouses, we should speak in the highest terms
That's
of them.
interesting.
We should lift them up.
Yeah.
I hear it said in fun, in jest, but I don't like it. So let this be a warning to all my friends out there. Never
If they've
dare
never
speak,
heard it before, they've heard
never
it now.
speak of your wife in that way in my presence. I think we need to be lifting them up, making them feel
Very
good about themselves.
interesting.
It's
Very
important.
interesting. I'm going to carry on with the emails at the moment. I know there was all sorts of things we planned which we're not going to do, but we'll come back to it another time. But I do feel there's some very needy questions here which I really would like to home in on. And this was one I wanted to bring up, but I'm glad somebody else has brought it up from their own experience, because whenever you talk about marriage, of course you've then got the singles.
Yes.
And this is a text. What about single mums? Do we still deserve marriage, and how do we go about it?
First of all, the fact that you had a baby, maybe out of wedlock, or maybe your first husband divorced you, does not make you unworthy in the eyes of God. As far as God is concerned, you're his child, and he wants the best for you. What God wants is the best for you. Now, that could mean marriage or not. One of the things we wouldn't want a person to do is just jump into a relationship that is going to compound the problem at the end. But one of the big problems in the Christian church is single ladies. Paul speaks to the situation in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. But I think that we have to be careful of his teaching there, because he's speaking about a very special period in the history of the church. It's going through a crisis. And he says, for this present crisis, I think we need to behave in this way and remain single. But God's intention for human beings was that they should find a partner. Unfortunately, in the situation in churches, not everyone can find a partner. Now, this is where I stand. I really believe in Christian introductory, what do you call them, marriage bureaus. Absolutely. I think there are a lot of folk there who are looking for someone, and if we can help them, why not? Provided that it's done in a sensitive way, it's done in a sensible way, that we're not exciting expectations. See, I know folk have entered some of these marriage bureaus, Christian marriage bureaus, and found that there are a lot of young ladies on it and a lot of divorced men.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean to say that that wouldn't be wrong, providing the divorce was right.
Yeah.
But I think we need to be careful. But I think, as a pastor, one of my big burdens, there are two things that have caused me hurt as I've looked at people. One is childlessness. I really feel deeply for couples who long for children and can't have them. And the other is for young ladies who long to marry and can't find a suitable partner. No, pastor.
Maybe even a pastor as
Maybe
well
a
that could
pastor,
help
who
them,
knows.
yes?
Yeah. And I don't know what to do about the problem, except to I don't want to excite expectations, and because sometimes people get prophecies. Oh yes, the man is waiting around the corner.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks' time, you're going to bump into him, and I think that does a lot of damage.
Well, it does,
I think we have to sit with young people and older people as well. I mean, your expectation of marriage doesn't end when you leave your 20s.
That's right.
I think there are older folk who are longing for that companionship. And we, Doug, we're in a very privileged position, aren't we? God has blessed us with wonderful wives.
Yeah.
And if you're listening, Anne, you heard what I just said.
And he meant every word of it.
And I did.
So do I.
In absolute sincerity, it's been the greatest thing in my life.
Yes.
But I do feel for those that haven't. And so I need to spend time and maybe help in some way.
Well, I think it does, because, I mean, all joking apart, we have appreciated our wives over 30,
Absolutely.
I think longer, for 40 years for you?
44 years.
44 years for you, yeah, 35 for us. And we have done that. And we still do. And I guess you're the same in that that we it gets better. You know, and you get to know one another more, and it does. There's a new depths to marriage, but we mustn't ignore the fact that there are a lot of people out there, and just because we've been blessed, that haven't, and we need to pray for them, and we at the very least we need to pray for them, and we need to encourage them. And it seems to me that what we're talking about in marriage, in laying down your life for one another, is where we have to come to I guess in all walks of life. Because some women will want to get married and don't. Other people have other aspirations, but they may never get them. I need at some point to lay that down before the Lord.
Yes.
The other day, and I shared this on Sunday evening a couple of weeks ago, but we've been looking through the book of Ruth at our fellowship, and we've been looking at the fact that the kinsman redeemer had to become a man. He had to be one of us. And I went to those verses in Philippians chapter 2, and what so struck me was the first, it says, have this mind in you.
Yes.
Now, I'd read that before, but I suddenly thought, okay, do I have this mind? And so I went through and looked at Philippians chapter 2, those verses on, when I said, okay, what is the Lord's mind? How did he do? If I've got to have this attitude, if I've got to be... And the first thing he didn't do, he didn't count a thing to be grasped. And I saw that picture of like that. I didn't see a... I just imagined... And I realized that if there's anything that I've got there that's not of God, I'm in trouble. And the only way to know whether it's of God or not is to release it. And if I release it, as with Jesus in Philippians chapter 2, he received it back far more than he had in the first place. He didn't count it a quality thing to be grasped back, and then God read. And it's really struck me, and it's made me think, there are the things in my life that I'm grasping. Maybe God wants me to have them, but am I grasping them? I've got to let them go and let God do what he wants to do with them.
I think that's a great thought. I think that in all things, our chief relationship is with Jesus and his will for our lives.
Yeah.
Just amplifying this whole issue a little, I don't think everyone is called to marriage.
No.
And there are those who don't want to marry, and that's fine.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be pressurized by the church. You know that single girls sometimes, say, when are you going to get married and when are you going to... And I don't think that helps because some choose it. I think an awful lot do want it.
Yes.
And I think there's a responsibility on Christian families not to be insular. The Word of God says he setteth the solitary in families. Yeah. What family can he set them in? Well, he can set them within the family of the church. So the church must make provision for that, that they feel a part of it. I think the language we use sometimes, I think the things we talk about, I think they should be inclusive so that those people can feel valued and a part of things. And then socially, I think, when it's always couples doing things together, they can feel very excluded.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think the church needs to provide ways where single people can come and feel very comfortable in coming. And then I think that Christian couples themselves, it's very easy to become insular.
Yes.
And I think that we need to be opening our families to bring into them those that have lost husbands.
Yeah, because your whole social structure changes, doesn't it, when you get married?
Absolutely.
And that is true, and in the Christian circles. And what you've said there is so important, that there is a place for the singles to be included.
Yes, and I think that we need in God to be asking God, how can I help this person to come to terms with and cope with the ongoing singleness that for some of them is harrowing. Well, when they come and be a part of my family, then that helps, doesn't it?
Yes.
So at Christmas or whatever, on other occasions. Yeah. And it's amazing, they then can very often build a relationship with our children.
Yeah.
And they can feel that they have children who love them and call them aunt. But it's a lovely thing, and I think that's a responsibility.
Amen. Amen. We're going to open the phone lines in just a minute. I just want to deal with this email first of all, because I think it goes to the heart of an issue which does come up when we talk in terms of marriage and partners and that. Please remember, surrender and submission only works within marriage if both partners are willing to do so. We've talked about this already. If one partner submits to another and the other struggles to do so, then it is a recipe for failure. I was advised to submit to my husband in order to save my marriage. His behavior got worse and I suffered as a result. I was determined not to give up my marriage, however I wanted to serve God. I asked God to change my situation so that I could serve him. This became the catalyst for a divorce. This was the last thing that I wanted, but I could not stop it, and I believe that God actually pushed the process along at times. Now I am free to serve God, but I am on my own. I've asked the Lord to change me into a suitable person to be a bride for any son of his that he wanted to direct my way. Problem is that if he has sent someone my way, I have not noticed him. This is not easy to deal with, as I know that I have at least 3 successors, one of whom was my competition at the end of the marriage. Maybe not going on to the remarriage side, just as that we will go on to that another time. But this whole business where people say, you've got to stay in that marriage, you've got to submit, whatever comes. Can that be right in all situations?
No. I believe that as a pastor, there are times when I have to advise a woman that she needs to separate from the husband. If there is physical abuse, emotional abuse, to a point where it can no longer be tolerated, then I need to advise the woman to withdraw from the marriage. What happens after that we might discuss on another occasion when we actually talk about divorce and remarriage, but I have no doubt at all that God does not expect a woman to stay in a marriage where she is being abused, either physically or emotionally. That is not God's plan or intention for her. And I would want to support her in that. I would want to attempt intervention, to speak to the husband, and if he refuses that intervention, then he makes his own decisions and he goes his own way. I would want to intervene as early as possible in that. That's why I think that when couples are going through difficult times, they need to find people that they can share with in confidence. I think an awful lot goes on in a marriage before it finally erupts in a separation.
Yes.
And if at some early stage they can begin to speak to some trusted Christian friend, then we can intervene at an earlier point and help.
We're obviously touching nerves today and touching very necessary issues, so we are going to return to this at some time. And we've still got stacks more texts and emails there, and I'll try and get through a few more of them. Let me open the phone lines at this point. 0208 972 1408, 0208 972 1408. If you want to come on and share your question with Warren at this time, please do. In many ways, we're dealing more with the marriage side than the divorce side. We will develop more at another program, but do come on and talk with us if there are issues which you have on this whole area. Maybe you've disagreed with some of the things that Warren has said, some of the scriptures he laid down. Maybe you see them in another way. Come on and let us know. Let's talk about them and share together in this way. 0208 972 1408. A couple more texts while waiting. My husband and I got married 2.5 years ago. We were not Christian at the time and got married in a registry office. We've turned to Christ 1.5 years. Now we want a church wedding.
Wonderful. Congratulations. I hope you're very happy. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope that you'll really sense this presence of God and that the prayers will be powerful and that God will bless you in your marriage together.
Amen.
Congratulations.
Amen. Amen. Good afternoon. My wife now has a child with another man. We have been apart for 14 years. Do I have to be alone or can I get married? I do not want to sin before God anymore. Thanks.
That's, in a sense, quite an easy question to answer. When we eventually get on to talk about divorce, Jesus Christ did give the exception upon error, which I understand to be adultery. We might amplify that more when we get to it. But I believe that if his wife has had a baby by another man, then she has broken the marriage. It's this one flesh thing. So that if in marriage you come together, you become one flesh. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, if you go and you sleep with a prostitute, you're becoming one flesh with her. And so in breaking that one flesh relationship, you're actually breaking the glue that God has put there, and you're breaking the covenant that God has made. And so I believe that in such a case, without knowing all the details, but from the evidence we're given in this email, then he is free to remarry.
Okay. We've got to call it, just to remind you, if you're not a regular viewer, we can't at the moment stack calls up. So we can only take one call. So while the caller's on, we can't answer any others. But as soon as we finish with that call, then we're open for others. So if you could just bear with us on that, we'll seek to get through as many as we can. Now, we have a caller. They wish to remain anonymous. That's fine. What can we do for you today?
Hi,
Hi.
Doug and
Warren.
gentleman, I don't know his name.
Warren, yeah.
I've just come in on the programme now.
Okay.
I was brought up a Christian, and I was a Christian when I got married. I gave my heart to the Lord when I was a teenager. I went out with my husband for 2.5 years. He did make some kind of commitment before we got married. And we had a Christian marriage, had children, but a year into my marriage, I found out he was a gambler, which I didn't know in the 2.5 years I was going out with him.
Right.
I stuck the marriage for 18 years and had 4 children, but one passed away young, so I've got 3 children now. I got divorced because of the pressure of struggling with money with 3 children. Bills weren't being paid, and eventually we were threatened with eviction of the house we were renting. And I felt I had a sack of potatoes on my back mentally. I just couldn't cope.
Yeah.
So we got divorced. I'm in my early 60s now. Been on my own a long time. And I really believe God for a husband. Because the loneliness is not good when you've been married. You feel it more than if you're single.
Yes.
And never been married. And I've trusted God for a husband, and nobody's come along that has really been, I felt, could be a husband to me. I went out with one Christian gentleman for quite some time, but in the end, things he was saying, I thought, things aren't right, and found out he was lying. And I've travelled with Christian groups to Israel and that, and still God hasn't brought somebody into my path. I'd like to know what I can do. Because the Lord says, delight yourself in me, and I will give you the desires of your heart.
Yes. Bless you. I'm sure you're not alone in that story that you've told us. It's not a story to you, it's real to you, and I'm sure there are many others that have the same thing. Warren, can you share?
First of all, let me say how I sympathise with you in a marriage in which the husband was not being the husband that God intended him to be. I think the gambling and the debt are major issues. When eventually, maybe on another program, we get to talk about divorce, I think it's a serious enough issue to bring about that divorce. I believe that Paul allows the remarriage of persons, and Jesus allows the remarriage of persons in certain situations, but Paul says as long as it's in the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing. And you're looking for a Christian husband.
Yes.
And what can I say to you in this time of waiting? All I can say is that I feel for you. Please don't just jump at any man that comes along.
No.
You've already made one bad decision.
Yeah.
It's amazing that when we're in that process of choosing a husband, sometimes we feel we're not choosing, that somehow or other we're landed with this man. And I think we need to be taking a lot more time before we marry to begin to understand who the person is and what he's like. I think in a lot of cases, as in yours, a man can make a profession of salvation in order to please the woman, and then when they marry, it doesn't work out. I think that's a very real situation that many, many people have found themselves in. But you're in the situation you are now.
Yeah.
All I can say is this, that you need to find peace in your heart.
Yeah.
I think a part of the problem is when you're struggling for something, then you haven't got peace.
Yeah.
And what I shall pray for you, and I will pray for you after I've finished this broadcast.
Thank you.
I shall pray not that somewhere God will bring someone to you, but that somewhere in this whole process you'll find his peace.
Yeah.
I believe he does give peace. In the struggles, the problems, we don't have all the answers.
No.
But we know this, that in the most difficult situations of life, he can give us peace.
Yeah.
And I sense that in this area, there's a struggle going on inside you, and you need peace. And so I'll be praying that God will give you peace to wait, patience, so that man can come along and that he'll be the right guy. Peace. God bless you.
God bless.
Bless you. And, you know, I think also what is sometimes so easy to lose sight of, and for you it's one thing, for us it might be a totally different thing, is we so want something and we can't understand, why doesn't God give it to us?
Yeah.
But sometimes God has his reasons, and we are so tied up with it that we can't always see those reasons.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that God doesn't want you to remarry at all, because I don't know. But what I'm saying is God is sovereignly in control
Yes.
of what's going on. And don't get your eyes off of him. Keep your eyes on him, to see him in control and to see him work out what he wants to do within your life. And may God, if he doesn't bring a partner in just yet for you to be married, but that he will bring others around you, that it's a slightly different relationship, but you can have close relationships with your fellow brothers and sisters that can really encourage you and build you up at this time.
Yeah.
We'll be praying for you.
Thank you very much. God
Okay.
bless you both.
God bless
Bless you now.
Enjoy the program.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye now. There are so many tough decisions, aren't there? And there are so many things we just don't realise what some people are going through from these angles.
And they're real, aren't they?
And
we can stand in our pulpits and we
Yeah,
can preach all the
that's
things.
right.
But then there
We've
are
got to
people
get
who
out there.
yes, and Jesus is there, isn't he?
Yes.
And we know he's there in it. We are faced with this major problem that there are more women than men in our churches.
Yes.
And that might be a failure of us as ministers to minister to men adequately.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's a
Maybe.
reality.
Yeah. Well,
But it's pain.
we need to seek God. Anne, good afternoon, Anne. Hello? Oh, no. Hello? You there, Anne? No. No. We got a buzzing noise, but I don't think we've got Anne. Okay. If you've to try again, and if you could try again, do come through, Anne. If we've lost you somewhere in the process, forgive us. But we're here listening to you and ready to talk to you if you can get back online. Interesting question here. Does the church, and I presume they mean the Christian church, recognise the African traditional marriage? It's not talking about whether God recognises it, it's whether the church. Before you answer that, we've got Anne back.
We've got Anne. Good.
Anne, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We lost you there for a minute.
And suddenly I was gone.
Yeah. Bless you.
Right,
What can we do for you?
Right. Well, it's an ongoing situation that I really need an answer about, because I don't have any peace.
Okay.
I'm in a present marriage at the moment, which isn't my first, but I have a terrible time coping with condemnation because I feel so wrong that I've married again. I was divorced, and every time I start reading the scriptures, I get very bound up with guilt and fear that I'm living in a continual sin state because I have remarried.
Mm-hmm. Warren?
We're well into the whole divorce issue here. Of course, we don't know the circumstances of your first divorce, but all I can say is that there are biblical grounds for divorce. And assuming that the divorce took place on the basis of those biblical grounds, then a divorce can take place, and the person thus divorced is free to remarry. I think that to talk about divorce without the right to remarry is a nonsense. We'll possibly go into that in greater detail. So I believe divorce implies the right to remarry. Now, what if the person is the guilty person in that first divorce? What happens then? Well, this is my position, and I would want to spell it out more fully on another occasion. I believe that the divorce, when it happened, put an end to that marriage for both parties.
Right.
I believe that the guilty party in a divorce can find forgiveness with God. Otherwise, we're putting people outside the pale of God's forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we're making them worse than murderers.
But
I believe...
yes, I understand that the Lord does forgive.
Yes.
But a bit like the woman at the well, when the Lord said to her, "Go and sin no more." We don't have an answer as to did she continue to live with that person she was so-called living with or married to, or did she forever remain single? And just to add another situation, I've heard Pastor David Pawson say that people shouldn't remarry. In other words, I sense that he was saying, it's almost an unforgivable state to be in.
Let me say that there are many, I don't know David Pawson's exact position, but there are many, particularly a lot of Anglican theologians, evangelical theologians, who believe that remarriage is absolutely prohibited on any grounds. That is not my position. I don't believe that's the position of the Word of God. I believe we're free. I believe this, that if a guilty party contritely, in true repentance, comes to God, then it needs to be recognized that that person is free before God to remarry. The problem occurs when they want to marry the person with whom the adultery has taken place. But even in that situation, nothing can be beyond God's grace. It's a difficult problem for the church to handle. Here's what I would say. It's a matter that needs to be handled by a church. A church needs wisdom in the handling of it. It needs wisdom in knowing the individual situation. Because even where there's a guilty party, who is to say whether that person is guilty or whether there were contributory factors from the other, it is all so individual that we need to be able, in God, to make judgments in individual cases. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul says, don't you know you're going to judge angels? You're going to judge the world? We should, as spiritual men, be able to look at a situation and help that person in that very, very individual position. I don't know your position. All I know is this, that in Jesus Christ there is grace, and that grace must extend to guilty people as well as to innocent people. And I think that in God there needs to be some means in the church of helping folk who are in that position.
Right. The other thing that keeps coming back to me is that I know this is an example. If a homosexual is with another homosexual and they regard themselves as married, and that's an ongoing situation, couldn't you say, and that's wrong, but couldn't you say the same about somebody who was remarried? I don't know if you understand what
I do. I think the question is, whatever illustration one uses, it always comes down to the same issue. It comes down to the circumstances that you are involved in. It doesn't come down to the circumstances that somebody else is involved in. And whatever illustrations we use, none of them deal with the fact of what did I go through? What happened in my heart? What has God done with me? Now, one thing I do know, and I would say this from what you said, I don't know whether it was a situation, whether you were right to remarry or not. We're not privy to the facts and we don't want to share them on air. However, what I would say to you is right here and now, as a believer in God, what God says to you is there is now no condemnation to those that are in Christ Jesus. Right. In other words, he will deal with it. Yesterday, I sinned. The day before, I sinned. I have an option. I can carry that sin around with me and the guilt of that sin and can say how terrible I am and awful I am. And there's a sense in which contriteness and repentance does that. But in the end, what I do is I take that and I say, Jesus, you've dealt with that. You've forgiven that. Now, whatever that sin is, that can happen. So supposing you have sinned, Christ has forgiven your sin. Yeah. And so you need, whatever what is happening at the moment is Satan is using that to take away your peace, to take away your rest, and to take away your ability to walk in Christ. Do you believe that Jesus Christ died at Calvary for sin?
Yes, I do.
You do. And do you believe that he forgave you of your sin when you came to him?
Yes, I do.
You
yes.
do. And do you believe that his blood and his life is available to forgive all sins as we confess them to him now?
Yes, and that leads me into another question. What if you forget to confess a sin?
Okay, I'm not going to go there right now, Anne, because we go out like a telescope in that. But what I do want to underline and what I want you to see is even if what you have done is sin, there is grace and there is forgiveness in the heart of God.
Yeah.
And the
That's a
thing that
wonderful,
you mustn't do
wonderful
now is to carry around that guilt with you.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Anne?
Thank you very much.
Bless you. If you need more, come back to us at some point, but get to see the heart and the love of God for you at this point in time.
I think that's really what I need the greater revelation on.
Amen. Amen. May the
Thank
Lord
you
give
very
it
much
to you.
indeed, and God bless.
Bless you now, Anne. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now. This was one of the first emails that come in, and I was actually going to leave it, but as soon as we're into divorce, I'll mention it to you. Hi, blessings to you all as you serve our great God, our great Lord and Father. I am divorced since 1993. I and my husband were Christians when we were married. I have been ever since. I am not actively seeking a partner, but it is my heart's desire to one day have a mate, but I cannot come to terms with the fact that according to Scripture, if I marry again, I will be committing adultery, even though the church allows me remarriage. I am a leader and a preacher, and I don't want to grieve God. What's your advice?
It is true that Jesus Christ very, very clearly says that he who divorces and marries another commits adultery. But I think that has to be understood within the whole context of the teaching of Jesus Christ in the New Testament and of Paul in Corinthians. And I think that when a divorce has taken place on biblical grounds, and we could investigate further at some other time what those biblical grounds are, then I believe that once a person is divorced on biblical grounds, that person is free to remarry. I believe the divorce has meant the end of the marriage. The marriage is dead. It no longer exists. So a new marriage relationship is not adultery because you are no longer married to the other person. That is my clear understanding, providing the divorce is on biblical grounds. What those are is a bigger question, and we maybe answer that on another occasion.
And Warren, I think it's true because there are one or two that are coming in like that, and you're all, most of you are saying that something happened, you were divorced in the past. In one sense, we can't give you categoric answers because, as Warren said, we don't know the reasons behind that. What we will do in a future program is we will lay out what we feel are those biblical grounds for divorce. If you need help in the meantime, make sure you come back to the office, make sure you come back to us, and we will provide whatever counsel that we can and help for you. Although please understand, we don't think we know everything, and as Warren said, he's sharing out of a lifetime of studying Scripture. That's the basis of we share on today.
And just to add two things. First of all, Jesus spoke into a Jewish situation. The Jewish form of divorce certificate stated specifically, you are free to marry another Jew.
Right.
And then Paul, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, he says, the woman is not bound. So the binding nature of marriage is dissolved, and the person is free to marry, of course, as it's in the Lord.
Right,
and so it's necessary to make that statement that divorce on biblical grounds ends the marriage. The person is free. Just as a slave is free, so that person is free to form a new relationship in God.
Great. Thank you for that, Warren. Christine. Good afternoon, Christine.
Yes, good afternoon, brothers.
Hi there. What
Yes,
can we
good
do
afternoon.
for you?
My question is, well, at the moment, I have no peace at all in my heart. I'm very stressed, and I've come to a crossroads, and I've been praying and asking God, what direction do I go in? Because at the moment, there's no one I can speak to. I am a Christian. I'm a born-again Christian. I've been married for 16 years. I have 2 children. When I did get married, I wasn't a Christian. I met someone, fell in love, the usual, got married. Everything was great. But the problem was, which wasn't a problem then, he's a Muslim. Okay, that wasn't a problem. But when he was hounding me and stressing me out and, wanted me to become a Muslim in the few years of the marriage, and obviously then I wasn't a Christian, so the more he was bringing tapes home, the more he was, leaflets and, constantly on at me all the time to read to become a Muslim. And then what happened, I remember at that time thinking, okay, he wants me to be a Muslim, I'm his wife, let me go search out first about who I am as an English woman and as a Christian, supposed to be a Christian, growing up here, having Christmas like everybody. So I searched the other way. I went in, to the Bible, started asking people about Christ. Well, cut a long story short, I found the Lord.
Right.
And then I became a born-again Christian. I was baptized. God has put so many Christian people around in my life. And Genesis has been my church for the last, I would say, maybe years. You're like my family. Howard, his wife, everybody, the late sessions, I watch everything.
Right.
But what happened then through the marriage, it became a nightmare.
Okay.
It wasn't physical, it was emotional.
Okay.
Because I have 2 children. Unbeknown to my husband, both my children have given their life to Christ. Just one day I was sitting on the sea, and first my son came, Mum, I want to become a Christian. But I looked at him thinking, do you really, Aaron? And he said, yeah, what do I... So we sat down, we said the Lord's Prayer, then again with my daughter, but it's been kept a secret. So we didn't say anything, we just sort of went on. But, but then my husband was, calling my son, to go to the mosque. He was blackmailing, if you don't go, you won't get nothing, you won't get this or you won't get that. So he's just a child and, he used to go along. Yes. But I used to pray, ask God to block Aaron's ears.
Christine, sorry, we're running a little out of time. Could you draw that just to a close? Yeah.
He's in Algeria. He's been there for 6 weeks. He's completely cut down everything, the money, everything, and we went counselling. And the only thing that's in my mind, what he said, that he wants a Muslim wife, he wants Muslim children. And when the counsellor said, "Well, what about Christine?" He said, "Well, there's no problem. I'll come backwards and forwards." But I've got to a point now. It's like, because I've been persecuted for, since I've become a Christian.
Okay. Yeah.
He's like, it's emotional. He criticised me. He hates all this.
Okay, Christine. Yeah. Okay.
My children are hearing all this, and
we hear, Christine. That's fine. We hear what you're saying. We can obviously hear you're very emotional and really tied up on it, but. Warren,
Sure.
Could you share a little bit with Christine, please?
I think you started by saying that you have no peace, and I understand that. You're in the turmoil of a marriage which has a major problem. You're a Christian, and you have a husband who is a proselytizing Muslim. He's seeking to either make you a Muslim or make your family Muslim or find somebody else. And that's a very difficult thing. Now, I believe this, that at the point where his emotional blackmail, his emotional abuse in your life becomes too much, then you are free to separate from him. I believe that in a sense he is bringing the marriage to an end, and then that releases you. I believe that God does not expect you. He expects you to suffer, to go through an awful lot, but there comes a point where it becomes intolerable, and God will not ask you to go through it, and God will allow you, I think, to separate from such a difficult situation. That's the very situation that Paul was speaking to in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. We have a believer and an unbeliever. And he says, when the unbeliever wants to stay with the believer and they're happy together, then they should stay. But if the unbeliever doesn't want to stay, and it seems your husband doesn't want to stay with you on your terms as a Christian, then he is leaving. Then it says you're not bound, that you are free. The one thing you must never do is allow him to make you give up your belief and your faith in Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. He has no right to do that. No right in God, no right in the law. Whatever he believes, you have your personal faith in Jesus Christ, and you must cling to that above all things. And we'll be praying that in all this turmoil, that God will bring it to a crisis and an end, so that you will be able to find some peace. By the way, it's wonderful that your children want to serve Jesus Christ and are giving their lives to him. That's amazing. That is wonderful in this situation.
And Christine, do find that fellowship in the local church. I know you're talking about Genesis, and that's great, and we, really are glad to be able to communicate with that. But at the same time, that personal fellowship, building up together, really can be of such a blessing to you at such a time. You need that strength in the Lord.
Can I speak into that as well?
Yeah.
I just picked up something you said, Christine. You said, there's no one you can share with. I think there's the importance to get into a church with this fellowship, but I think you need some individuals that you can trust. And there are people that are good Christian people out there who won't betray you. They'll keep your confidence and can help you through this crisis. You really need to find someone who's a strong Christian to help you through this. That's very important for you.
And our final callers today, we just have a few minutes left. Again, they wish to be anonymous. So welcome.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, really, about my situation. Been married for many years. My husband committed adultery several times. I'm a very committed Christian, so is he. Well, he says he is. I want to make my marriage work. I don't want a divorce. I do feel that it's like a sort of personal Calvary for me, the whole thing I'm going through. He says he wants to change, and yet I think probably where women are concerned he has. But there are other things, like he smokes marijuana, other things. I just want to ask your advice on this.
Okay,
really.
thank you.
And I'll ring off, shall I?
Yeah, yes, bless you, thank you. Warren.
First of all, our sympathy that you're in a marriage where the husband has committed adultery. That's deeply painful to a woman. I think you are right in as much as you attempting to keep the marriage together. I think that God wants us, even where adultery has taken place, we must recognize that divorce is not compulsory. God's first desire is that we extend forgiveness, that reconciliation take place, that conciliation happens, and that you come together again. That's the first thing, and that's the most important thing. But if that adultery is ongoing, then there must come a time when you say, I cannot tolerate this anymore. And you, with Christian advice and counsel, will know when that is. If he has stopped seeing other women, that's good. And if there are other issues in his life, well, I'm sure that in a sense, they can be dealt with by you in that relationship. But well done for seeking to forgive and remain married even through crucifying circumstances. I think that's right. But there'll come a point, maybe, where God says, you don't have to tolerate this any longer. You are free to separate.
Warren, our time's gone. Let me make a few comments about next week, and then I'll come back to you for a final couple of minutes or so. Apologies for the phone noise going on. The director was called away to other things, and therefore we couldn't turn it off straight away. So apologies for that. Apologies also that we haven't got through all the emails, but as I said, we will be revisiting this subject probably early in the new year, and so stay tuned to hear about that. As far as I'm concerned, Lord willing, I'll be back on Sunday. I haven't been there for a couple of Sundays for various reasons. Back with Voice in the Wilderness, 10:30. This coming Sunday. So maybe you've got some things like this that you still need to share. Do carry on and share them. Do give us a call, ring us up, share with us at that time. I look forward to that time of meeting with people, praying with people, sharing with people at that time. Next week, here on Simply the Truth, on the 26th of November, we've got, interestingly, I hadn't really planned it like this, but something that Warren actually touched upon while we were talking through this day, and that is looking at the whole subject of male leadership. Is leadership only male? And I can hear you women right now. Please, I know 2 men will be here discussing it. I should take all the phone calls from women next week. I think you should know me by now, and you will know Julian. If you've watched further programs, we will seek to deal with the things sensitively, as I think we have today. And therefore, we're not going to say, you've got to be an authority, that's it. What does the scripture say? What do we share together? What is there? And we will be looking at that, the whole area of male leadership next week. Obviously, this program gets repeated. Look at the website. You'll find out when that is. We have especially usually it's 1 o'clock on Sunday. There's the details to get onto the website. 1 o'clock on Sunday on Genesis. This program is repeated other times. All sorts of classics going on. Really look forward to your company at such times. Warren, last words for you, please.
Good. Two things I want to do in closing. I want to take you into the book of Malachi and something that God said through Malachi. And then maybe at the end, just come back to those lovely verses in Ephesians chapter 5. Here's what God said through Malachi. He says, you've broken faith with her, though she is your partner, the wife of your marriage covenant. Emphasizing again this covenantal nature of marriage. It is a contract. There are conditions. But there's this issue of the oath, the swearing, the making promises before God that binds us in that way. And then he goes on to say, has not the Lord made them one in flesh and spirit? They're his. And why one? Because he was seeking godly offspring. So guard yourself in your spirit and do not break faith with the wife of your youth. I think he's warning them about this fact that there are spiritual causes to the breakdown of marriage. And I think that if our spirit is right with God, then our marriage is going to be right with each other. And now those lovely words from Ephesians chapter 5. I probably won't have time to say anything about them, to read them, but let them speak for themselves. This is what Ephesians chapter 5 says. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but he feeds and cares for it, just as Christ does the church. For you are members of his body. For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. God couldn't have given greater significance, meaning and importance to marriage than to compare it with the relationship between his son and the church for which he died. And his eternal purpose in that church in eternity, it's just a reflection of what God wants to happen between a husband and a wife, what he gives everything for her. It says Jesus wants her to be radiant. I want my wife to be radiant. Not living in my shadow, but radiant because of the way I give myself to her. God bless you.
Bless you, Warren. Thank you so much for sharing the scriptures, sharing your thoughts today. And as I say, we'll come back, we'll pick it up. I actually might even get past question 1 next time.
Maybe.
We would do, but bless you. Thank you also for watching. It's I know with these subjects they really are so much, and they go so deep, and there's so many aspects we still haven't covered. But we will be back another time. In the meantime, stay blessed. If you need help, do come on. Do search us out. We'd be glad to see you. The Lord bless you real good. Bye for now.